Landlords in New York are facing bankruptcy and foreclosure after a city that recently passed rent control decided to decrease rents by 15%. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have quite the interesting article for you today. Once again, it's coming out of the state of New York. Now, obviously, New York is not the place to be a landlord, especially a small landlord, in my opinion. Now, you can make great money at it, but you really have to know how to play the game. And unfortunately, the cities, the municipalities, the government officials are changing the game in the middle. You know, they're changing the rules to the game and making it even harder to be a landlord there. So, a city in New York recently passed a rent control law, and it's not New York City. And they said, hey, we're going to pass this rent control thing here because, prices are going up too much and the people, they can't afford the rents that are out there right now. But then they did something that is absolutely radical and insane and something I haven't seen yet anywhere. They said, well, we're actually going to mandate that the landlords lower their rents from the current rate by 15%. That's right. They're telling landlords they have to cut their rents from the current rates, okay? That is crazy, okay? I've never heard of that before, but this is inevitable, okay? This is inevitable when it comes to rent control, when you have a government in charge of setting the prices for things rather than the open and free markets. So, we all know that there is a ton of inflation going on this year and for the last year or so, right? And prices have skyrocketed for landlords, for tenants, for everybody, okay? So the cost of insurance, of utilities, for taxes, the property taxes that we pay, the price of maintenance, everything has gone up in cost, okay? And when it comes to landlords, even our financing for our loans has gone up in cost due to the increase in interest rates, right? But then they come and they say, hey, even though the costs have increased for you as a landlord, well, you have to cut your rents by 15%. Now, how is that fair? Okay, it shouldn't even be legal, in my opinion, right? And I feel for these landlords who are up there dealing with this nonsense. I hope that they get some attorneys and sue because there's nothing you can do to fight this if this is a city law. It's insane. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Have you seen a city, municipality, or area with rent control ever, have a decline in the amount of rent that they're allowing landlords to charge? I mean, I can say personally, I haven't seen that. I imagined that this would be the worst case scenario where, landlords, not only are they not allowed to raise the rents, but they actually have to, lower them. That's crazy. Okay, it's insane and it ignores reality. And that's why, it surprises me to even see this. So anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from reason.com and it says, landlords sue over city mandated 15% rent cut. Property owners in Kingston, New York argue the city is vastly underestimating its vacancy rate in order to justify ruinous rent cuts. And believe me, these rent cuts would be ruinous, okay? When you're a landlord, you understand that the financing you receive is based upon the rent, okay? And the bank, they will call their loans due if they don't think that you're able to pay, okay, and they'll take that property from you. So like I said, this could lead to foreclosure and bankruptcy for landlords. But anyway, let's get into this article. To alleviate an alleged housing emergency, officials in Kingston, New York are mandating a 15% reduction in rents. Rental property owners are now suing the city, arguing it failed to meet state requirements for adopting rent control and that the ordered rent reduction amounts to retroactive punishment. It's going to bankrupt many landlords. Richard Lanzarone, executive director of the Hudson Valley Property Owners Association, says of Kingston's Rent Guidelines Board decision last week to reduce rents by 15% for leases signed between August 2022 and September 2023. If it stands, it'll lead to abandonment, tenant displacement, blight, and the destruction of housing. Yeah, and all of those things are true, okay? It's absolutely ridiculous. It's obvious that these people, they are making decisions based on what feels good. I feel that this is the right thing to do without looking at it logically, okay? They didn't talk to any landlords when they made this decision. I guarantee they didn't. Or if they did, they completely ignored them. They ignored economics, they ignored everything. And then they put this decision out there thinking that it wouldn't have any consequences. Well, you know what? This is really going to hurt the tenants, because you know what a landlord's going to do when they aren't making any money? They're going to stop doing maintenance on their buildings. They're going to stop making repairs. Okay, these buildings are going to fall into disrepair. They're going to get foreclosed upon. They're going to be owned by some bank somewhere who also isn't going to be making any repairs. Basically the housing stock, it will deteriorate. And that is not a good thing for tenants, okay? So, and the only thing they get out of it is lower rents. I remember I read a story, I can't remember what country it was, right? But this country had passed rent control laws, right? And it made it so that the landlords could not make any money off of these rental properties, because the tenants, once they moved in, the rent would never raise. So these tenants were paying so little in rent, they couldn't even maintain the buildings anymore. So you know what the landlords did? They abandoned them. They were like, you know what, I'm out. I'm not maintaining this thing. It's cost me money to maintain it, and I can't make any money off of the rental income. So the tenants were sitting in these buildings. The buildings didn't have any running water, didn't have electricity in them, but then the tenants were stuck in a position where they couldn't afford to move because the rent was so cheap in there, and so basically, what I'm saying is that's a worst case scenario, but I could see something like that happening here where, they're telling landlords, hey, you have to cut your rents to a point where you can't even perform your maintenance or cover the costs that you have, okay? In July, Kingston became the first city in the state to take advantage of a 2019 New York law allowing communities outside New York City and its surrounding counties to adopt rent stabilization. That law allows localities to regulate rent hikes in larger multifamily buildings constructed before 1974. About 1,200 apartments in Kingston fall under rent stabilization. Tenant activists say this is the first time a New York municipality has voted to cut rents. While they pushed for a whopping 30% rent reduction, activists still took a victory lap at the 15% cut. This reduction represents a paradigm shift in how we address the needs of the many over unregulated market conditions, said Michael Tierney, tenant representative on the board, in a press release. Yeah, and it's ridiculous, okay? So basically, they probably have a rent guidelines board that is composed that is composed 100% of anti-landlord, pro-tenant people, okay? And they passed this without taking into consideration economics, okay? Or common sense for that matter. Because anyone could tell you that, hey, there's been inflation in the last year and the cost of everything has gone up, which might explain why landlords may need to raise their rents. And if nothing else, telling landlords, well, you can't raise your rent super high, but you can keep them at the same level as last year. No, they didn't even do that. Okay, I don't even agree with that, but they didn't even do that, okay? They said, no, you need to cut your rents. That's ridiculous, okay? So apparently they believe landlords live in some kind of phantom universe where the laws of economics do not apply to us, okay? Wow, this is an insane story. Property owners are less pleased. Lanzarone says landlords have told him the rent reduction will make their buildings unprofitable or force them into foreclosure. He tells Reason that today, HVPOA is filing an amended complaint against the city in Ulster County Supreme Court, arguing the mandated rent reduction is an arbitrary decision that ignored data showing that operating costs for property owners are rising. Lanzarone also says past case law prevents rent regulations from being imposed retroactively. And that's another thing right there. Basically, they're saying, well, you need to go back to the month of August of 2022 and then cancel all your rent raises since then. So they're applying it retroactively. So, this, if it is found to be legal would set a very, very bad precedent. Remember that New York City is, a city of renters, okay? So it's a very large city, 8 million people live there, and there's literally millions of rental units there. So imagine that they get they see this law in this little town of Kingston, right? And they're like, you know what? Maybe we'll do the same thing. We'll decide that we need to, retroactively, we'll go back, 3 years and cut rents 30, 40%, just because they feel like it, okay? And they think, oh, no, this won't cause any problem. No. This is the problem with government regulation. This is the reason why I say don't invest in these sort of places, okay? Don't expect that things are going to get better. They're only going to get worse, okay? There's only going to be more rules passed, more laws passed that hurt landlords, and it's going to get even harder to operate your business in these sort of places.